Hi, I'm Shannon Cochran, Vice President of Creative and Design for Patcraft. I'm honored to partner with Jaime Derringer of Design Milk for our Transform Design Workshop for the third consecutive year. Since 2018, we have brought together a select group of designers to dive into topics such as mindfulness, creativity, and sustainability. "2020 gave us the opportunity to rethink our event, which we took online for the first time. We expanded our reach to include many other curious collaborators across the country. Our focus this year has been on consumer drivers and how the need for connectivity has remained consistent throughout the current pandemic and has required us all to rethink design to achieve that basic human need, but in a safe environment. We've reached out to our design community, including past Transform Design participants, to ask, how are you all working differently this year while remaining mindful of this concept of connectivity? It was refreshing and inspiring to see the results. Our team has also shifted the way we work, interact, and create with each other. Keeping safe and distancing is, of course, part of our work protocol as well, both in the office and in our manufacturing facilities. While this year has certainly had its challenges, by remaining intentional on how we connect and understanding the consumer drivers that exist to ensure we design to those standards, we can hopefully reflect back on 2020 as a time of accelerated innovation and adaptation. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to Transform Design. Welcome. We're so happy that you are all able to join us today. And as I mentioned, this is the third year we have co-hosted Transform Design Workshop with Design Milk. And while this looks a little different when we left Atlanta last year, I don't know that we had this in mind, but I think it's really a great way to connect with our clients. And I know that what we hope to accomplish remains the same. We want to engage and inspire each other through rich dialogue, insightful conversations, ultimately creating those connections. And today we'll explore consumer drivers like connectivity, wellness, convenience, and balance, and what those mean in the world we're living in today when a lot of those things feel out of reach. I know at least for me they do. So we as a design community create balanced solutions that keep us connected. So just to share a quick agenda on how today will flow, we'll take a few minutes to get to know some of our experts today. We'll start with Jaime Derringer of Design Milk, and then Jennifer Edwards from WGSN. We want to better understand their approach to trend watching and trend forecasting. And then after these conversations, we'll begin our panel discussion, followed by audience Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can add those to the question box on the right side of your screen. So just a few housekeeping logistics. We do have a team behind the scenes that will help with any technical issues. So if you have questions, please, as I mentioned, put those in that question box and they will be able to help you, whether it's technical or it's something you want to ask the panel later. We'll also be using this feature. So as I mentioned, if you think of a question, go ahead and put it in there, and we'll be answering those at the end. So finally, I want to mention that at the end of the audience Q&A, we will have a live raffle for a pair of Apple AirPods. I don't know why that's a tongue twister for me, but it is. So stick around for that. We will have an announcement of the winner, and they will be randomly selected. So you have to be present at the time of drawing. So stick around to the end, and we will draw for that. So now I want to introduce you to our co-host, Jaime Derringer, who is also our moderator for our panel discussion. We all know Jaime as the founder and chief creative officer of Design Milk, which is arguably the leading website for modern interiors, home furnishings, art and architecture, really anything design. And when I think about things that really keep me inspired and things that I look at daily, both personally and professionally, Design Milk is definitely at the top of the list. So today we're going to start by getting to know a little bit more about Jaime and her process. So can you quickly introduce yourself and tell us a little about Design Milk?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Transform Design Workshop. I am so excited about this and so happy to be here and glad we could figure out a way to make it work despite all of the obstacles we've been facing in 2020. Design Milk started in 2006. So I believe next year is our 15th anniversary, which is really exciting. I'm pretty sure that it's one of the only things I've done in my life that I've stuck to for a long time. And I'm really proud of it. It's like you said, Shannon, it's become a great destination around the world for modern design, interiors, architecture, etc. And I kind of started it, I'll go back to the beginning. I started it for fun on the side. I was working at a day job in my previous life. I was a project manager, and I had bought a townhouse, and I was looking for a sofa, and I started down the rabbit hole of design on the internet, and it just kind of went from there. And I thought, well, I need a place to collect all of these really cool things that I'm finding. And we're so blessed with technology today, but back in 2006, it was a challenge to bookmark things and save them on the web and go back to them. But I also always had a desire to do publishing. I was always interested in communications and writing. So I think it was just all of the things that I really loved put together in one place. And I feel very lucky to have been able to share that with so many people. And the fact that it's resonated with so many people over the years has really just been fantastic. I certainly felt all of a sudden like I wasn't alone in the things that I loved. So it was nice to create that community and watch it grow.
Yeah, I love hearing that story. And I know it's also evolved over the years. So can you talk a little about how you have grown Design Milk and have focused on different things as well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the beginning of it was much more personal and community. And then all of a sudden, one day, someone reached out to me and said, can I put my banner ad in the sidebar of your blog? And I thought, that sounds like a business transaction. And then, of course, the big light bulb went off in my head. And I thought, oh, maybe this is something that could be more than just my hobby. And then I went down another rabbit hole of like how to make money with a blog and run a business and learn all of those things, because I don't have a business background at all. And I learned so much over the years of growing it. And, it really just started with that one interaction. And I think that the biggest driver for me with it was the having a challenge to approach, something I didn't know, I didn't understand, and the desire or basically curiosity really is what drove me to like, how do I do that? Oh, let me learn how to do this. And then I just started like, going through the list of checking all of these new skills off the list. Like, okay, I learned HTML. Okay, I learned how to do this. And it did grow very organically. I mean, the community around design on the internet was very small in 2006 and rapidly grew. And the business just kept going and going. And part of it was me just seeing where I thought, there were opportunities to create something fun and interesting to do where there weren't opportunities. And I think that's probably, most businesses are successful when they find a spot where they fit in, whether it's a niche or it's a need. But I wasn't really seeing me in design, and I was always a design consumer. So I was trying to really find where I could have a voice, who was speaking to me as a consumer about design. Because prior to that, I felt like it was designers talking to designers, or educators or architects talking to other architects. And I was just looking for cool stuff as a consumer, and I wanted to learn.
Yeah, I love that. So you are obviously looking at a lot of content. How do you curate that? Because there's a wide range of design topics.
Gosh, so in the beginning, it was just me doing lots of deep dives on the internet. But as the site grew, we started to get people sending us submissions of their products. And then it was just going out to trade shows and walking the aisles and handing out business cards and seeing all of the new products that were coming out. And now it's all of those things in addition to, Instagram, Pinterest, all of the new ways that we're consuming information these days. Prior to social media really being like a thing, it was a lot more challenging to find what you were looking for. Now it feels like it's ubiquitous. You just open your app and everything is right there. I don't know if that makes it harder or easier.
Yeah, I'm the same. I go back and forth. So how do you monitor and report on upcoming trends or new innovations? And like, how do you decide what is, worthy of your?
For a really long time, it was always just something that I don't know, that I just liked. And then as the team began to grow, we all kind of came in with our own things that we liked, and there was everyone had kind of a voice and could choose what they liked and wanted to write about. Really the only structure around it was it's supposed to be modern, and anybody's interpretation of modern could be completely different. But now it's kind of like, we're looking for innovation in some way or another, and that could be a new way of interpreting something that already exists. It could be challenging the status quo. It could be new materials, new methods, anything that feels new, fresh, and like, oh, I haven't really seen something like that before.
I love that. Love that. So what is your favorite part of the job?
It still is looking at cool new stuff.
Yeah.
I can't help it. Like Instagram is for sure like my favorite platform. I'm a very visual person. If you asked me to design a room, I couldn't put two chairs together that worked, but I could look at a room and say, that's cool and new and interesting. So I think that's really my only, quote, superpower, is just like looking at something and knowing. And it's a very intuitive feeling.
I love that. And I always love just hearing your perspective to your process as well. And to kind of segue into our panel discussion, we are going to bring Jennifer Edwards in and go through her process a little bit. So just a little background on Jennifer. We're going to welcome her. Jennifer Edwards is from WGSN. She is the consultant director, and she provides strategic solutions rooted in the cross-section of insights, innovation, and behavior. She has devoted her career to understanding what drives consumer behaviors, which is what we're going to be discussing today. So Jaime and I are going to talk to her a little about their research process, methodologies, and the approach to trend forecasting in general. So I'm excited for everybody to get to know more about their work because I find this process super fascinating as well. So welcome, Jennifer.
I can't hear you.
You would think after 6 months of having all video calls, I would have this down.
Never.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I am also equally fascinated by this topic. So I think it would just be really great for you to lay the groundwork here and just explain kind of what is WGSN, what does it do, and what do you do there?
Yeah, of course. So WGSN is the world's leading trend forecasting agency. And so what we do is we really do look to the future and look to say, what are consumer sentiments going to be? What are the shifts that are going to happen? And then how is that going to impact, let's say, the colors that people are going to want, the silhouettes that they're going to need, the groceries, the ingredients, the foods that they're all going to want to eat. But what it really is what we do is we really take a look at what shifts are happening in consumer sentiments, what's happening at a macro level, and then how are all of those forces going to really begin to sort of like come down and really shape consumer behavior. And,
So oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead, because I'll talk forever.
Yes. Like, how do you sort through all of that and define, like, these things are important? I mean, what's the qualification process? Like, how does that work?
It's really cool and it's really interesting. And I know a lot of people tend to think that it's just instincts or it's just kind of like your gut and then you just sort of make it happen. And it is a little bit of that. I can't lie, I won't fool you, but it is a lot of data that happens. There's a lot of data behind it. I think that the number that we use now is that we source over 40 million data points. And so we're constantly scraping retail and commerce data. We're constantly looking to understand what's happening on social media. And then we pair that with a lot of other primary research that we're constantly doing. So we're always doing focus groups. We're always talking to experts. We're always talking to people, whether it's IDI, being in their homes. There's just a huge mix of that data. There's a huge mix of talking to people. There's also the mix of that our team is out and we go to, I think, over 600 events yearly. So we're at trade shows and we're at conference shows, we're at fashion shows as well. And we're looking to understand what exactly is happening in those worlds. We're taking pictures, those pictures get tagged and they get logged, and there's a recognition system that happens that begins to identify the different trends that are happening there. But then there's also the intuition as well. So what happens if we have all this data and you have this little bit of intuition? We come together twice a year globally because we're located all around the world. And so we have our data scientists will come in and say, this is what we're seeing. This is what the data is showing us. And then you'll have consumer scientists say, well, we've been talking to people. And then this is what we're seeing. And this is what we hear in my region. And then you have that little bit of person that's like, but my gut tells me, my intuition is telling me this is happening. And the data people will say, okay, let's go back and let's look and see if there's data to support it. So it's all of these beautiful things that come together that really allow us to forecast trends and forecast what's happening in the future.
So are you taking all of this data from the data scientists and then kind of just like funneling it down into like a couple of groups of trends, and how do you sort those trends? Are they like regional or is it geographic?
It's all of that. So what happens is that you come together and it's almost a big family argument. So your data scientists are saying, these are the things that we're seeing, and this is what we see it impacting, let's say fashion and color and blah, blah, blah. And then you have everyone else saying, well, this is what I see. And we come to a consensus and then we look for the data to actually support what it is that we're seeing. And it happens over the course, it happens twice a year. The data scraping and the talking to people and all that is happening daily, but we come together, WGSN as a team, twice a year and sort of fight it out and begin to understand and really begin to really see what is happening, what those shifts are. And we look at everything from a macro level, from a global level. And because we are a global company who has team members in every single country around the globe, we can also look at it from a regional level as well and see what the regional nuance is.
Interesting. So one other question about that, when you meet twice a year, are you looking at trends like for the next 6 months, or are you talking about like the next 10 years? Like how long are we talking here?
We forecast trends up until 10 years from now, but our main focus is in the next 3 to 5 years. So looking to understand what is happening in the next 3 to 5 years to really help companies be able to plan and to be able to delight their consumers by meeting their needs.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So who is your subscriber base? I mean, I know that we are clients of yours and have been, but who else do you see as clients?
Everyone. I couldn't even say. So we have over 6,000 subscribers to the site alone. And I don't think I mentioned this earlier, and I should have. So I'm director of consultancy. So what I do is I take those overarching themes and those overarching trends that we forecasted, and I work directly with a brand, like I would with like Patcraft, to really bring those to life for your specific brand. So we have 6,000 subscribers to the site, and then we have many more who don't even subscribe to the site, but still come to WGSN for their consultancy. So they span across all of the all different industries and across all different countries as well.
So
And
interesting.
and it's all the way down from like baby food to technology to cartoons to entertainment. It literally is just all of the industries.
And so like, are these trends, are you seeing them being consistent, or are they fluctuating over time?
They definitely shift and change with time. So we take a look at all of those macro drivers that are happening. And I should have mentioned this as well. One of the things that we do is we take a look at things from a stepic perspective. So we look at what's happening in society, technology, economics, the world of politics, the world of innovation. So what is new that's coming out in the world of creativity, in the world of culture as well. And so we're looking at it from that very macro level. And I forget the question that you asked me. I'm sorry, Jamie.
I was just asking how they fluctuate over time. Like, so let me give you a more specific question related to that. Is it like something where you see like from year to year, there's like a giant shift, or do you normally see things kind of ebb and flow over 3 to 5 years?
I would say they ebb and flow over 3 to 5 years. That's what I was getting at. Because you have these huge macro forces, it takes a long time for them to really shift and to really change. So it takes about 3 to 5 years before you see really huge changes. But obviously, there are little things that are happening on a seasonal basis and on a yearly basis as well. But those huge changes and those huge shifts in consumer sentiments and the way they feel and their thought process, that typically takes about 3 to 5 years.
So do you see these trends repeat over time? Because I know we always talk about how things are cyclical and they just sort of swing. Do you see repetition?
We definitely see some repetition. I think for me, one of the coolest things that I've been able to see is that when people are experiencing a lot of fear or they're experiencing a lot of uncertainty, they always go back to the past. That feels familiar, that feels comfortable for me. And so they begin to bring those same trends that they were once kind of really akin to, and they bring those back. And then that's what's really helping drive that cycle as well.
So obviously we are in a unique year, we will say. How has that changed your process or, affected how you all do your work?
In terms of how we identify the shifts and the trends. So typically, and it's funny that you asked that. So right about now is the time that we would typically be meeting all together. This is one of the two times that we get together in London and talk about what we see happening in the next 3 to 5 years. And we, like most people, have had to make that shift to doing it virtually. And how do you replicate those same family arguments that you're having in person?
That's what I wanted to ask.
Just like log off and be like, I'm not talking to you anymore.
So interesting.
So I do have a question for you about 2020. Obviously you've had to shift your business as well. So, clearly there's been a major shift, but there's been a number of major shifts. But let's back up. Let's think about a couple years ago or last year. What were you predicting was going to happen in 2020 prior to the pandemic?
I can honestly say, and I can be checked on this, a lot of what we're seeing right now is we were predicting we're going to happen. We did not predict the pandemic. Don't put that on us. But the pandemic just really accelerated and heightened a lot of the feelings that we were already having and a lot of the things that we were already doing. Across the world, we were already living with this sort of state of fear and anxiety, right? So many things were happening with the climate. So many things were happening politically. So many things were happening socially already. So we were already living in fear and anxiety. And then the pandemic just really came in and just heightened that and accelerated a lot of the trends.
Wow, that's really interesting. I just have a quick other question. Do you find that you're able to really see humans like on a global scale kind of shifting in the same ways over time. I'm just like kind of fascinated by that whole idea. Even people that are in very different societies.
I think so. I mean, there's obviously that nuance, right? You have to go in and you speak to different people, shop different ways, they think different ways, but we are more, and I know we're going to talk about this some as well, because we can't have a conversation about trends without talking about connectivity, but we are so connected. I think there's 7 billion people in the world and 5 billion of them have a mobile phone. We are so connected. In fact, one of the trends that we're seeing that's going to start to come now, it's about being hyper local, and this idea of having your identity based on like your hyper local and your hyper community, because we become so globalized. And so you can take a look at what's happening from a macro level and really see how it's impacting all of us on a very global level and how a lot of us are reacting in a very similar way.
Oh, that's really interesting. So I guess I'd like to transition into our panel discussion, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, maybe lay some groundwork for what we're going to get into next. What are some of the consumer drivers that you're kind of seeing? Obviously connectivity is one, but maybe just give us a high level taste.
Yeah, I would definitely say connectivity is one. I mentioned it a few minutes ago. We are more connected than ever. More than half of us have a smartphone, and yet and still, and I'm talking pre-pandemic, so many of us were feeling lonely, right? There was an intimacy recession despite the fact that we were all so connected and more connected than we ever were. So there is this driver of connectivity and people having this urge and this desire to connect in a real way with other people. And that's obviously being heightened right now.
Absolutely. Okay. Shannon, do you have any other questions before we jump into our bigger discussion here?
I mean, I have a million, honestly.
I want to know everything about everyone now.
I know. No,
Okay.
I think we can jump into it.
Okay, cool. So we are also going to bring on a fourth panelist. Hi, Jenna. Jenna Sheingold. Really quickly, before I jump into that, make sure you're sticking around because we're going to have an AirPods drawing at the end of our entire event today. So you have to be present to win. So make sure you stay through the end. And Shannon also mentioned that we have a team on the back end. So if you have any technical issues, make sure you let them know. And you can use the questions box to do that. And then at the end, we'll also have a Q&A. So hold all of your questions till the end, and you can type those questions into the questions box, and I'll repeat that when we get to our Q&A. So let me also introduce Jenna Sheingold. She is the creative director and principal interior designer of Jenna Sheingold Studio. And she's passionate and opinionated about all things design, from the choice of flatware for a meal to the feelings a work of art might give you in an overall space. She aims to incorporate all of the senses when creating spaces for living, working, and being. And after spending time working under a few different creative powerhouses, Jenna started her design studio in 2016. She finds creative inspiration for her projects in all design realms, from tattoos to paintings. Me too. In her free time, she likes to obsess over new tech, get emotional with music, practice Reiki, peruse museums, travel, and enjoy great food. So welcome, Jenna, to our discussion here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so let me just dive in and recap that Jennifer was just talking about some really cool trend forecasting and consumer drivers that she works on at WGSN. So I want to dig a little bit deeper, and that's the purpose of this discussion, to really get into some of these drivers, including connectivity, wellness, convenience, and balance, and how they influence many of the design trends that are emerging and on the horizon. I find myself, sometimes I call myself a trend spotter, but like clearly I'm like at the tail end of that, because Jennifer is like at the very beginning. So like she's really the true trend spotter here. But what really interests me about this, as someone who's really interested in trends, is that there are these micro and macro drivers that accelerate things, accelerate change, accelerate the ebb and flow of what we do every day. And you might think that you're just making decisions, but sometimes you're making decisions that are very influenced by things that are happening that you might not be aware of. And this is incredibly fascinating to me. So we're going to explore that and also explore what basically like what came out of 2020 in terms of consumer drivers, because we did have a little bit of a left turn here, even though you explained, Jennifer, that some of these things you've already predicted. And then we'll talk about 2021 and what's going to be happening in the future, because when we think about these trends, and if we're looking at 3 to 5 years out, you know, what's going to happen in the future and how will that drive design trends in the future? So Jennifer, can we talk a little bit about, let's just talk about wellness first. Tell us a little bit about this particular driver, because wellness feels like a very big buzzword in design right now. And how has that actually been accelerated this year?
So obviously wellness, like you mentioned, is a huge buzzword, and it's something that we've been observing with consumers for a really long time. At this point in time, I believe it's a $4 trillion industry. And consumers are constantly, and I should say this too, I think it has a lot to do with connectivity. So for one, because we are so connected, right? We do feel this need to somehow step away. And how do we begin to have more wellness in our lives, more mental wellness, more physical wellness? But I do think it's also driven by the fact that we are so connected that we get to see other people, and we see other people's efforts or appearance at wellness, right? That person appears to be really zen, and I'm watching her on Instagram, and I'm watching this person on Facebook. And so it's contributing to us also wanting to experience more wellness. Over the last maybe 10 years, people have been really stressed out. I feel like the Debbie Downer when I talk about the fact that there's been all this fear and all this anxiety that's been pressing down on people for a long time, not just 2020. People have been seeking wellness. How can I feel better? How can I be better? How can I do better? And I think also on one side of that as well, you have people that are looking to really optimize. How can I speak better? How can I learn more? How can I work out more? How can I be physically better? And on the other side of that, what we're seeing is that we're having a lot of people that are all about radical self acceptance. I don't need to be better. And that's a form of wellness as well, right? Like, I am good as I am. I am fine. And I accept me as I am. I think now, just being on Instagram when the pandemic first started, there were all of these memes that were like, if you're not using this time to meditate and to start a new business and to do something and to generate some sense of wellness for yourself, then you're wasting the time. And then now you look around and the memes are saying things like, if you're still alive, if you were able to
Doing
great.
Too much pressure.
Doing good.
That's funny. A side note, are memes something that you look at, or do you know what memes are coming out?
It sounds crazy, but that is a part of the science, because it is a way that people communicate with each other. I've seen conversations just when talking with consumers where they only speak in memes. So I'll send you this meme and you'll send this meme back, and then the person will send that meme back, and there's a whole conversation, there's a whole language that's happening. Or there's certain memes that people are really sending around and they get more traction than others. And so we do track these different memes and look to understand what do they mean and what are people using them, how are people using them to communicate.
Wow, that's really
New
cool.
language.
Yeah, for sure. So Jenna and Shannon, this question is for you. So thinking about this whole wellness thing and then how it's been expedited, how do you see wellness? Maybe we can even back up and talk about how wellness really entered interiors and commercial design over the past couple of years, and like, where do you kind of see that now?
With clients in particular, I've seen a shift in the last couple of years in terms of how we start a project. And particularly in these last few years, working with clients initially to get a holistic idea of what they want from the project, not just how many people do we need to seat, or how many tables we're going to have for eating. It's stepping back and trying to understand from the client's perspective, what is the vibe they want to have in the space? How do they want people to feel when they walk in? What senses do they want addressed? So for me, it's really about getting a sense of the overall feeling rather than the nitty-gritty to start.
And you know, for us, I think in the past, we've really associated wellness with health, and we've talked about it a lot in like healthcare spaces. But I think as we look at where we are today, all spaces become healthcare spaces. And we have to think about, you know, how do we think about wellness more broadly? And it's not only health, but self-improvement, like Jennifer mentioned, but you know, how do we spend our time? Do we have those pause moments? I mean, how do we disconnect? Because, you know, that's been one thing. We are constantly on a, you know, virtual meeting. How do you disconnect? And I think as we think about design, it's important to focus on all of those things, which can be fairly daunting. But I think there are a lot of ways to do that through aesthetics and how you use pattern and texture and even lighting and acoustics and how the space flows. So, no, I definitely think it's evolved. Do what?
Oh, I just added and smell.
Yeah, yeah. And so I think, you know, the term has definitely evolved, and I think it'll continue. I mean, I think we're in that phase where we've gone through the immediate needs of what we need to do to get back into the places we shop and work and learn. And so now, like, what is that future looking like, and how are we changing those spaces to better support those wellness initiatives?
Yeah.
Does that play into textures, materials, things like that? I mean, Shannon, you know, from your perspective, is that something you're looking at from a material perspective?
Absolutely. And, you know, it's funny because a lot of times we think of like these really smooth surfaces, especially now because they appear to be cleanable. Like you can sanitize and disinfect and you can kind of tell when they're clean. But then that brings in, you know, an acoustic challenge if everything is super smooth and hard. So like, how do you bring in those textures? And a lot of times, I mean, we look to nature. I mean, we've talked about biophilic design for a long time. I mean, it's soothing, number one. People, it's familiar. You know, Jennifer talked about how going to the past. I mean, it's something that people are familiar with. And so we look to nature and how things are organized, in the colors that are used, in the way that the textures come together. So I think that, you know, all of those things affect how people experience that space.
Jenna, do you have anything to add? Sorry.
Oh, well, I was just going to say similarly to what Shannon said, that, you know, the texture really indicates not just the feeling of cleanliness, but also noise is such a huge concern. So
Yeah.
Textures as a whole really changed based on holistically what the overall space needs.
Yeah, I think prior to this, there was so much stuff getting covered in felt. It's like your whole office is just like covered, lighting and cubicles.
Not my favorite material to look at either.
But it absorbs sound.
Yep.
Let's talk about connectivity, because clearly that is one of the biggest things that we're hearing about this year. So Jennifer, you talked about you know, connectivity a little bit, but I would really like to talk about you know, what is behind this driver and how are we responding to this? And you also talked previously about how this is something you kind of saw coming, but it's been accelerated. So can you talk a little bit more about this consumer driver of connection?
Sure. I should probably state too that connection and connectivity is just basically an intrinsic human need and desire. It's something that has helped us all the way through evolution, through innovation, and it's something that is with us now. We as a species need to connect. Like we need to connect and we crave connections. And so that craving and mixed with technology has taken us to connecting online, right? And so we're spending so much time in our phones and we are able to connect with each other digitally, and we've been able to connect with each other virtually. And what we're seeing now is almost kind of like we've had all of these URL connections and people are really looking for IRL, so in real life connections. We're really looking for something. We've all connected with each other, I would say on almost like a surface level, being able to see your pictures and your thoughts and those types of things. But now everyone is craving something deeper, something more emotional, something real, some way that they can really, really actually be with other people. And that's kind of what's driving a lot of what we're seeing now. I know Shannon and I know Jenna will talk about it as well, and what that means for design. But because people are really, they're craving something real, not just sort of that surface level connection. People are really craving an emotional connection to something and to someone. We've had, like I mentioned, these cell phones, there's 5 billion of them. And yet when we did polls with people in the US in 2019, before the pandemic, you had nearly 50% of adults saying that they feel alone and that they feel lonely. They don't have anyone to connect to. And so we're seeing now that even with the pandemic, that has really accelerated it, because even those minor connections that you have with other people, that speaking to the sales associate, maybe giving a handshake to a coworker, a hug to someone, you no longer even have that anymore. And so we're really seeing people are just like craving connection more than ever.
So from a design perspective, this idea of connectivity, since it's been very accelerated this year, but previously we were still talking about that in the office and such. Jenna, do you have any insight into the trend of connectivity in design and how that's changed or shifted over time?
Yeah, just obviously in this last year, things have shifted radically, and largely trying to create space for in-person connection that is socially distanced. So working with clients to set up their backyards so that they can have socially distanced little get-togethers, right? And spacing out family rooms so that seating is far apart. These are some of the smaller ways we are starting to see shifts, right? Because I think the basis of wanting connection and not having it through technology comes down to the conversation is lacking, right? This true connection with someone. We all know that, virtual calls aren't really the easiest to have a conversation, especially something that's not planned out like this. I've been to more than a few virtual birthday parties that were no fun for anybody because everybody's just shouting over each other at the same time. And so as we talk about connection, it's about that real human connection of conversation, the nuance of being able to get together. And so for me, that is really about, at the moment, creating spaces that work for the moment we're in, as well as, in the past few years, the connectivity of just making sure that offices are totally technologically set up so that every conference room has its own iPad to manage who's in the space at a given time.
And Shannon, can you talk a little bit about how connectivity comes into play in the design process?
Yes. It's interesting because really our entire process has been built around, and I know Jennifer has mentioned before, this idea of this desynchronized society, and we were built on synchronization. It's everybody in the office, and we were together and collaborating and working on projects. And so we have really had to change the way that we work to adapt so that we still get that interaction, because it's so important to the design process. Like, nobody wants something that, I designed by myself sitting in my living room, because, you need those insights and perspectives from other people. And I think, ultimately, it's all about personal experiences, because we've all had different experiences, and we have to figure out how do we connect those experiences with what we're doing when we're not, live? And so we've had to be more intentional about how we do that, because that's where all the goodness of the process happens. It's impromptu interactions. It's somebody walking by and seeing something you designed on the floor and saying, hey, that's really cool. Or, that reminds me of, whatever. And you're like, oh, I didn't notice, that looked like a bear or whatever. Because everybody sees things a little differently, and those are essentially gone. So I think because of that, it's forced us to be better storytellers. So I will say that's one positive that has come from this, because we have to, we have to share like what our connection was to whatever we're doing in order to get the emotional connection from others to get that real feedback. So, I mean, it's been a process, but, I feel like we've really adapted well in making sure that we're still engaging. And I mean, even with clients, I'll just add, we were traveling a lot. We would take product out and say, do you like this? Does this work? Where would you use this? Well, we're not doing that. And so we've had to create these virtual interactions so that we're still gaining those insights and we're still getting perspective outside of us. So, it's pushed us to look at things a lot differently, which I think is never a bad thing.
Yeah, I can imagine collaboration would be kind of more difficult when you think about design teams needing to work together on something, and touching and feeling and seeing is so much of a part of that, that it could be incredibly challenging to, work as a team virtually. So yeah, I think you're not alone probably in that struggle. I'm sure many people are having the same. So one of the things that I think is really interesting about these consumer drivers, and some of the things we've already been talking about, is that there is this sense of a juxtaposition. We're together alone, we're connected, but we're disconnected. There's a lot of this like very odd polarizing things happening right now. And it makes people feel pretty unsettled, uncertain, unsure. It takes away some of our comfort and our security. So Jennifer, is that something that you've been consistently seeing? Is that something that always existed, or is this like a very accelerated version of that?
Well, I would say yes. So it is something that we have been seeing and we have been tracking for a few years now, but it's something that's definitely accelerated, right? Like you mentioned, I'm alone, but I need to be alone because it's not safe to be around other people, but I want to be around other people so much. And so because you before you weren't doing it, because to Shannon's point, we were living in this desynchronized society where we had lost sort of the rhythm of our society. Remember, everyone used to go, and I think we talked about this before, but everyone would kind of go shopping at the same time, commute in at the same time. You would see the same people. It was a rhythm to it. And now that we've completely lost that rhythm, which was happening before the pandemic, and then now even that you've lost the rhythm and you can't even almost get it back, even if you wanted to, even if you want to go out to the corner store and to see the shop owner, you have to do it with the mask on and gloves on, and you dare not touch anyone, you dare not talk to them. So we are seeing, I think it is accelerated, but it is this sort of juxtaposition that we've been tracking for a really long time. People have been really fearful, and they want to experience that fear and express that fear, but at the same time they want to feel calm, and they want all the wellness, and they want the calming colors. Or people want to connect with everyone and they want to be on their phones with them, but then at the same time they feel lonely and they feel alone. So it's something that's it's been happening, and it's definitely accelerated now, especially because of the fact that you just absolutely cannot do a lot of the things that you may want to.
And how does this work in the design process, Jenna?
Well, for me, it's really about sitting with my clients, and this past year it's been over Zoom, and getting to know their needs specifically and their space specifically. So whether it's a residential space or an office space, I have to sit with them and really spend time with them and get to know them and find out what exactly their lifestyle is before we can even dive into how we should move walls or materiality that we should pick for floors and whatnot. It's really about connecting and forming a relationship so that I can have a shorthand and, read their, folks aren't always as easy to say when they don't like something. It's pretty easy to read when people love something. So developing that kind of shorthand with clients takes a lot more time virtually than it has in the past. In the past, I would initially take clients out to dinner or out for drinks and just relax and get to know each other. And now it's via Zoom, and so it's a little bit more sped up, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, sometimes people are weird when they're on camera.
Yeah.
I just feel like you don't get the same level of comfort with someone
Exactly.
through screen for some reason. I don't really know why that is.
I have for a few meetings sent ahead some wine so that they were in the right state of mind.
There you go. So Shannon, with this strange polarity and all of these opposites that we're experiencing right now, are there shifts in your product development, or is there anything that feels like juxtaposed within that process?
Absolutely. It's interesting because we had seen a shift towards more hard surface in our business, but I think this has definitely accelerated it and accelerated the way in which people are using hard surface. So that has been one. The other, I would say, and we sort of touched on it originally, is just materiality and innovation. And are there new products that sort of fit that hybrid bill where, they're super easy to clean or easy to sanitize, but then they provide acoustic benefits. We've seen a lot of discussion about rugs and how people are using those. And, a lot of times that can help with acoustics and sound, but also they're super easy if you want to adapt a space for a different use. So that has been something that we are looking at. Are there ways that you can use our product to, change the function of a space super easily? So I think that adaptability is going to be really important. But, I think, like we mentioned before, I think you have to really balance that tactility with the solid surface, the hard surfaces, because that can impact productivity, especially if you're in an open environment, which a lot of us are today. Ultimately it's all about balance and how you layer things. I mean, you can do it other places in the floor, you can do it on the walls and your seating and things like that. So I think just being cognizant of those things. But yeah, we've definitely had to reprioritize.
One of the things which we touched on a little bit in this conversation, but really haven't dug into, is the idea of technology, but also of convenience. It's wonderful that we have this GoToWebinar and we have Zoom and all of these things that have really helped us. And one of the things that's really been helpful for me and my family, which I'm sure has been helpful for others, is Instacart, Postmates, those kinds of delivery services. Having access, but these are all brought to us by technology. Convenience is clearly something that I don't know if that's considered a consumer driver or a result of that, but I guess, Jennifer, could you talk a little bit about convenience or technology or both of those things?
Yeah, of course. As we continue to move forward, not just 2020, but beforehand, people were all about convenience and all about how do I do things. I always feel like the dark cloud. How do I do things more conveniently? How do I get more things done? But the part about that is what we were talking about when we talk about desynchronized society, right? You have all of these conveniences. You have your food being delivered. You have your groceries delivered. You have people that'll come to your house and wash your car, and you feel as though you're supposed to have more time, and you don't. and you feel as though you're lagging.
How is that possible? I completely agree with that. That like all of these things are happening, and I'm like, how do I not have 4 more hours in my day?
I did not even cook the dinner. I didn't get the groceries. I didn't cook it, anything. So you have this sense that you're supposed to have more time. You're supposed to be even more effective because you have all of these technologically provided conveniences around you. And the fact that you're not being more effective is impacting people on a psychological level and on a mental level. People really begin to feel as though the world is sort of, I think you call it deceleration, but the world is accelerating faster than they can keep up. So now we want even more conveniences. Okay, I need things even more convenient. I need more. Just constantly chasing this idea of being more productive and being more effective. And it's a trend that we're going to continue to see. Even when we look at this sort of exodus that's happening from city and more into suburban life, people aren't just going to the suburbs, right? And just saying, forget all of the conveniences that I had in the city. No, they're requesting and requiring those same conveniences in these small towns and in these suburbs. Consumers, we're not letting go of our convenience anytime soon, even if it's causing us psychological stress.
Human behavior is so bizarre. Okay, Jenna, let's talk about technology and design and how technology has actually impacted your design process and or made things more convenient or easier. But then is there also the, detrimental part of that at all?
So for a few years now, I mean, I'm a millennial, so I've always leaned into tech as a way to help me be more efficient and communicate more efficiently with clients. One of the things I started years ago was that we have a shared Google Drive folder where every client-facing document goes into, so that the client, they can ask me, right? But like they have a place to look before they're emailing me or texting me or calling me, asking me questions. Similarly, within that folder, I have a spreadsheet of every single material that we've selected, so that not only we can track the budget, but then if the contractor has a question specifically about a material, he's not trying to track me down all day. He can just go into that spreadsheet, pull up the link, and find the material. And so because I have been working technologically that way for a long time, I've also been somebody who tends to order most of my products online for clients because all of the information is right there in a URL, versus going to a store and picking something out. It's not as seamless then for me to communicate the details to the clients. But this year in particular, I shifted from, I've always done hand illustrations of all of my projects, and this year I'm switching entirely to digital. The hand illustrations are obviously prettier and they're more fun to look at, but the detail level that I can get in a digital design is much simpler, and therefore easier to clearly communicate from afar. If I've gone on site and measured out my bathroom, for example, and got it down to a 1/16 of an inch, then my drawings are perfectly accurate when the contractor comes to, and then they have fewer questions. So there are lots of programs that I'm integrating to make my experience and my client's experience more seamless.
Is there anything that you're using that you find to be like crazy easy to use, or has saved you so much time, or are there any technologies that you're just like loving?
I'm a spreadsheet wizard, so I have tried out lots of the various platforms for designers, and I always come back to that my spreadsheets are better because I can manipulate them to be exactly the way I want. And I actually found that teaching myself SketchUp was not, it seemed scary. But I did some coursework on LinkedIn and got really into it, and was like, oh, this is exactly the same as drawing by hand. I just needed to learn the tools. So, some of these things seem scary, especially when you're not quite a millennial, right? I've been using a computer since I could walk probably, but they are relatively easy to learn. And so it takes just looking for programming to teach yourself.
Yeah, sometimes I think back to like when I was teaching my grandma like how to use a VCR, when we got them a TV with like a complex remote control, and it was like so difficult to try to explain it. And I feel like, you know, our society is, it's accelerating so quickly with technology. It's almost impossible to say like, oh, I don't want to adopt that right now, because then you're like totally left behind, like so quickly.
Left behind in a matter of a couple of years.
Right, exactly, or even 1 year.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Shannon. So in terms of influencing design, you know, speak to us about technology and convenience. Has that helped you?
Yes, I will say, you know, it's interesting because we're in a fairly new building. It was we moved in 3 years ago, I think, but we did not anticipate a global pandemic where, you know, 2/3 of our workforce would be at home. So we're in an open office concept, and so technology was a challenge when we came back to the office because our rooms held a smaller amount of people, a lot of times 1, maybe 2 people. And so we had different teams working in different places. And so we had to update some technology to make sure that you could do a meeting where you could actually see and interact with everyone in the room and people at home and people working in different parts of the office. So, I mean, that has been something that, you know, when we moved in 3 years ago, we thought we had all of this worked out, and but didn't anticipate the difference in how we would be working just 3 years from now. But one of the things I think is really interesting here, and we were at a trend forecasting session about a year ago and talked about how expectations would be set outside of our industry. And I think today more than ever, that is so true. And we have to look to other industries and, you know, how do we share ideas? How do we make this process more efficient and easier and less clunky for our clients? And so one of the things that we're doing is trying to use our digital platform in a little different way. So how do we share idea starters for our clients? How do we show how you can use wayfinding through the floor? How do you define space with changing products? So how do we make that easier for our client and more readily available so that it's pretty intuitive to click through and understand what products are what? One of the things that we've done, and you know, this was something, luckily, we started before the pandemic, but smaller samples, because when you think about flooring samples, some of them are quite large. And if you're having those delivered to your home and you're working on multiple projects, I mean, very quickly, you have worked yourself out of an office. Mm-hmm. And so we have smaller samples that we are sending to our clients so that they can get the initial color and then look online. We're also updating our website to make sure that we have better visuals because that's something that is way more important today than it was even, you know, 12 months ago. So a lot of things like that that we have had to shift perspective a little bit to try to make it easier for our clients.
I just wanted to add, as well, as I was listening to Shannon, I was thinking about how, you know, technology is shifting on how I do things, but it's also shifting in terms of what my clients need. A big example is I do a lot of remodeling of old homes, and so it's not always cost effective to necessarily add Ethernet ports all over the house or add tons of outlets. So we're frequently adding many more outlets than older homes have for electricity, but then helping clients I've done tons of research on Wi-Fi networks just so I can help clients understand what do we need to put where in terms of electrical and Ethernet so that they can have a good Wi-Fi system set up at home. So much more important this year than any year in the past.
Yeah, for sure. I want to shift gears real quick. This is the last question that I'd like to pose, but it's just really to Jennifer, but maybe to all of you. These drivers, so we've got connectivity, wellness, convenience, balance, technology. These are all the things that we've just talked about. we all know that we're not going back to the way things were before, probably ever. There's going to be some things we picked up in the past 8 to 10 months that we'll probably continue adopting. So how do you see these drivers continuing to influence? Do you think they'll shift, change? Do you think any of them will accelerate even more? Is there any insight you can give us for the future?
Yeah, for the specific, for which one, or just
I
any
don't
of
know, in general. I don't know, pick one.
I don't know. Let's talk about a few of them. This idea of connectivity, right? And the driver for connectivity. I think that we are going to see that that's going to continue to increase, and it is going to continue to become something that's even more, that consumers are going to crave even more. But the great thing about it, I think, as we move forward to a vaccine, as we begin to regain some semblance of normalcy, we will see that people will begin to really, I believe, I hope, have more more authentic and more for real, in real life connections. And they don't all have to be IRL, but they will begin to have more deeper and more emotional connections, and they won't just rely simply on technology or simply on surface level. So we talked a little bit about how people are actually leaving cities and then going to suburbs, right? And they are beginning to become more connected to those neighborhoods. And as they become more connected to those neighborhoods and to that community, one of the things that we're going to see them actually begin to become more connected to is this idea of native knowledge, right? And just understanding, okay, I'm on this land, I'm a part of this community. What happened here? What came here before? And this is caused by sense of connectivity, but also by the fact that all the systems around us are failing. So we need to go back and look and see how are people doing things before. Maybe they have some knowledge that we don't have. So people will become a lot more interested in native knowledge. So we're going to see people really gravitating towards native aesthetics and native foods and native ways of living and things of that nature. And I think that has a lot, and that's how we're going to see connectivity really evolve throughout the next maybe 3 to 5 years.
Interesting. Jenna and Shannon, is there anything that you see coming based on the conversations you've had over the past 8 months with, you know, whether it's the design process or spaces that, you know, you're seeing accelerated or will really be a big thing next year, or anything shifting?
I'm working with a lot of folks on second homes, a lot of city folks who are looking for, you know, second homes outside of the city. So they have, maybe their jobs require them to be in the city, and if, you know, one day when there's a vaccine, they'll be able to go back to the office a few days a week maybe, but they're seeing more and more that, you know, if I can work from home all the time, I want to sometimes. And so long term, I'm working with lots of folks that want to get out of the city, maybe not all the time, but a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And then put those, you know, whichever property they're not at, put the other one on Airbnb or VRBO or what have you. I think we're going to see even more of a shift towards this sharing of spaces.
Yeah, you know, I would say the wellness, we have been talking a lot about, and how that affects really every segment that we're involved in. And I think that will continue to evolve and grow. And I think that is very related to, you know, balance, which I know just not only, you know, in a space, but personally. I mean, that's been something for me that's been difficult, because it is like constant. And so I think just trying to manage that in our new way of work, without, you know, burning out. Because I feel like even though we're working from home more, we're working more. And so making sure that you're, you know, thinking about those things. And I was really excited to hear what Jennifer just said, because, you know, it's very interesting. My neighborhood, I have connected with my neighbors like I hadn't before, and I've lived in my house for 10 years probably, but my husband and son and I would sit on our porch and we got to know our neighbors, and we would have outdoor movie nights. And, you know, I think it's interesting because like your circle has changed during all of this. And I think that that is something, you know, that for me has been a good thing. So, you know, just happy to see how it evolves. And I do think that there are going to be so many positive things come out of this that we're going to think, you know what, that is way better than it was before, or makes so much more sense than it did. So.
Okay, I would like to now open it up for Q&A. So just a reminder, we're doing a drawing for AirPods, so stay here until after the Q&A to see if you've won. But put your questions in the box on the right that says questions, and we will get to as many as we possibly can. I do have a couple of early questions that have come in already. So is there a consumer driver that one of you, like something that resonates with you most? I mean, Shannon, you just talked about, you know, connecting with your neighbors. Jenna, is there something we've talked about that really feels like most resonates with you, and has it shifted since last year?
Yeah, I think wellness has really, in the last couple of years, been a focus of mine in terms of how I communicate with clients and understand their ideals for their space. And now this year, focusing on, frequently we would focus on spaces and how they are used for large groups of people, whether that's at home or in the office. But now it's about how do we create wellness for individuals within the space. So that's been a huge trend this year in terms of, you know, creating spaces that have harmony and are calm, and spaces that are interesting to look at and vibrant, but still can be a space of Zen, still can be a space to relax in. And so I, you know, frequently challenge clients to let me push them a little bit on pattern and color. We still want to create spaces that are vibrant and interesting to look at for a decade or longer, but also create a sense of calm. And there's a balance in that.
Jennifer, is there anything for you that's just been like, wow?
Yeah, I think for me, I would say one of my favorite sort of consumer drivers or trends is connectivity. And I don't know, connectivity as kind of like overarching, but the idea of connecting more to your local community, the idea of connecting more to your identity, or we're going to see a lot of what we're calling decolonized futurism. So people really looking to understand who they were before they were colonized, and then who would they be had they never been colonized, and what the future would look like. And I just think that's so it's really inspiring, and it's something that just feels really creative, and it's something that's really different, and it's a connection to the past and to the future. And that's something I'm really inspired about.
That's really interesting. Shannon, do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, you know, the one I'm probably struggle with the most is balance, like I talked about. I mean, you know, I think it's just and adapting to the new way and being okay with that, and that's from the way we work to our personal lives. And so I think that's the one that, and it really hits a lot of the other ones as well. So I think that's going to be important moving forward.
Yeah. I feel like, sorry, just to jump in, but it's so connected. Even when you think about balance, and what the one that I said that I felt strongly about was connection. But even when we talk about people looking back to native knowledge and really wanting to have that connection to that, they still want to balance it with technology and this idea of future and past, and this juxtaposition, and where we kind of exist somewhere in the middle at all times.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a bunch of questions to get to. So this one is for Jennifer. Can students access WGSN's forecasting information?
It's very expensive, I have to be honest. But there are a lot of different schools who we do have programs with that are able to access WGSN. Specifically, I know FIT and a few other programs as well. We are also in the process of providing free access to HBCUs, to the WGSN site, and to some of our sister companies as well. But I would say ask your school, ask your professors, they may have more insight there.
Great, thank you. One of the questions I got is about social media. How do you see social media changing as people move to more in-person connectivity? I think one of the things that I've noticed for sure is that I'm pretty comfortable watching people's Instagram story videos without being like, oh, that's not, there's no cameraman or there's no lighting and like, oh, it's a little glitchy or, whatever, it's dark. Like, I think we've, since this has started, or even prior to, I think we were kind of moving more to that like more human connection online. Through social, but it's totally been accelerated now that we've all been at home. We're doing these things. I get to see where all of you live or work, and people's getting interrupted by their kids or noise or whatever. It's much more acceptable. So I think like the social media has definitely helped us stay connected, which has been a benefit, but also allowed us to let our guards down in a way that I think is really beneficial for us. I just feel like it's kind of let us peek behind the curtain of what people's real lives are like, so that we're not just fed what they want us to see. We kind of sometimes see everything, the good and the bad, and it makes us feel a little bit more connected, right?
I agree 100%. Is that what we're going to see in social media, to your point, Jamie, is it's not going to be these like hearts with the perfect kind of like sunset in the background or your avocado toast. It's going to become a lot more real and the connections a lot more authentic. And so you like, to your point, the lighting won't be perfect. You're in people's homes and maybe they aren't cleaned and camera ready. It's just going to feel a lot more real and it's a lot more authentic, and it's going to help us with those like authentic connections with one another.
Another question we have about, oh, Jennifer, this is for you. So when you talked about the potential shift to in real life socialization once again, do you anticipate that being like a gradual shift? And if it is a gradual shift, how much enjoyment and entertainment do you think we are going to still need being home?
I don't know if it's going to be gradual. Can you imagine that if we have a vaccine and they say like, hey, everyone, now you can go back outside and you can touch people. We may be having parties and in-person connections all of the time, So I'm not exactly sure how gradual it will be. I think that there is such a craving and such a to help people and interact with other people that I think that the second we're allowed to do it, we're going to do it, but we're going to do it with caution. I think there still will be that caution. I can imagine even after we have vaccines, people will potentially still wear face masks or still be. You've grown so comfortable not touching things. It's going to take a long time for you to get back to touching things and being in that.
And we'll still have flu season every year.
Exactly.
So we talked a little bit about social media a minute ago, but and I think I may have been the person who mentioned that I am an Instagram junkie, I guess you could call me. Are there other platforms and other visual we talked about memes too, like what other things are you looking at for trends? And then is there anything that either you, or, Jenna or Shannon are looking to from a visual perspective to help you when you're working on projects or needing inspiration for products? So Jennifer, you first.
Yeah, I would say TikTok.
Oh, really?
Not just sort of TikTok because it's the platform, but the way that people are telling stories on TikTok. And it goes back to what you were saying, Jamie. It's so lo-fi. It's so throwing a towel on your head and pretending as though it's a wig and playing the part of two people, and you're telling it. And you're telling a story and it's still engaging and it's still entertaining, but it's done in this way that's very authentic and it doesn't require a lot of props. And it's just changing a bit of the way that we communicate, and it's changing a bit of the visuals that we expect from one another.
Yeah, I will say I was introduced to TikTok by a coworker while we were through the pandemic, and it was life-saving, honestly. But, you know, one of the things, we have looked at interactions through different digital sources. So it could be through, you know, the way Instacart interacts, but, you know, looking at different platforms outside of our industry and how they interact with consumers, and is there anything that we can learn as a flooring provider that might make that a little easier, a little more intuitive for our clients. I also think that like packaging is very interesting, and you know, even the materials that are used and how they're used, and almost like this curated sense. I mean, I know I joined a cocktail club or two while we were staying at home, and you know, just like this curated package of things. And I think that also reflects that convenience driver as well. But just so well done, and you know, graphics and just overall packaging, I think is all very interesting to look at.
Jaime, I'm with you. Instagram is my probably my biggest vice, both stories and watching the feed. And I really enjoy the naturalness of it, seeing people's homes when it's a mess because mom and dad have both worked all day and kids are trying to do Zoom school. That all to me is inspiring because it's how people really live. It's not the polished photographs of the perfect space anymore. And I love to see how people really live, particularly because then how can I design to make their life easier? How can we institute organization systems that give things a place in a home so that it's easier to live your real life day to day, and maybe not, you know, have as big a mess on the table that day. So I really find Instagram to be the place I go to over and over again. And TikTok too. I was introduced to TikTok at the beginning of quarantine by a couple of tweens, and you know, they're on it for all the dances, and they tried to get me to do quite a few of those dances, and I am not coordinated enough, so I offered to film. But as you're watching all these different families dance or do fake cooking shows or whatever, tell stories about their life, you get to see their space and feel inspired by real people.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another question about living conditions and spaces. So we talked a little bit about second homes and moving to the suburbs, but how else do you see living conditions changing trends in the home or even in the office? And how do you think that might affect the demographics or, you know, people who have multi-generational households? You know, there was a big trend of like, what was it, aging in place prior to this. So are there other trends like that you see that might impact like the way we live or work?
I think people want more spacious bathrooms, more bathrooms, so that as we are one day able to have folks come visit and stay with us, and we're able to, you know, congregate together again. Every house I work on, it's all about the number of bathrooms, so that compared to the number of bedrooms, so that everybody can come and stay together. And then having, you know, this has been a trend for a long time, but open floor plan in terms of your living space, your kitchen, your family room, having that all open and pass through so that everybody can hang out together. That I'm continuing to see. I have not gotten to work on any offices yet this year because I think still, you know, I had a couple of office projects that got put on pause, and they're still on pause because I think in terms of that kind of space, we're still waiting to see as we come out of quarantine and have a vaccine, what things are going to look like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a level of uncertainty. So I don't think anybody here really knows what the answer will be until we see it play out. But I definitely feel like there's going to be some shifts in how we move around space or what we need in the future. maybe more of us might need that extra home office now. Who knows? So health is obviously a big concern. A question here about, do you think that the habits and designs we've adopted to boost health will last, or do you think that things will go back to normal once the vaccine comes out and COVID kind of, you know, not goes away, but is less of a threat, I guess, to the general population?
I'm of the mindset that they will last. I think that moving forward, we will be fearful, even once we have a vaccine for COVID. We have been exposed to the fact that there is a such thing as a global pandemic, which I don't think any of us were ever thinking about, and we don't ever want to experience that again. So I think even like I think I said this earlier, even when we do begin to venture outside again, we will begin to see, we will continue to have face masks. We will continue to be cautious about what it is that we touch and who it is that we touch, even though we're still craving those interactions. But I do think moving forward, we will be more cautious in the way we sort of move around the world.
Beautifully
Yeah,
designed hand sanitizer stands aren't going anywhere.
yeah.
Do you think that we can like globally accept the elbow bump as like a handshake, like a handshake substitute from now on? Because I kind of like it.
I don't see why not. And I think Larry David had a patented elbow shake or something.
Elbow shaking, yeah. Okay, Shannon, how did Patcraft start working with WGSN? And would love to know how you incorporate this kind of research into your product development process.
So I was trying to think yesterday how long we have used WGSN. I mean, 15, I can remember back 15 years and we have used them. I mean, as long as I have been here. And I really feel like WGSN has evolved in categories that they cover, and then the way that they present trends and drivers to their clients, which I have really liked to see. But I mean, we use them a lot for, you know, color direction. I mean, we definitely see a swing, and they're really good about breaking it down. You know, we may look at like active and see what's happening there, which a lot of times might influence what we are doing. We might see color combinations in interiors. They do look at, you know, floors and walls and innovations, and they have a great trade show recap if there were trade shows. But, you know, just for things that where we can't be everywhere, they are. And so that's one of the cool things about it is a lot of times it's support for things that we're seeing. And then a lot of times it makes us think differently about maybe what we're doing or even how we're doing it. There is a lot of like innovation and sustainability information there. Not in our industry necessarily, but a lot of industries. And so we may see something that somebody else is doing and think, oh, that could be cool. Can that be applied to flooring? And so, you know, we use it a lot. All of our design team has access to WGSN and probably all use it differently. But it's just really nice to see how it's broken down and a little look into the future, I would say.
Okay, this is our last question. How can very small businesses incorporate trend forecasting into their work?
It's not even they 100% should, right? It's a way to get a leg up. It's a way to understand what's happening with the consumers and what's happening in the world. Number one, you could subscribe to WGSN to be able to have access to all of those trends. There are also many different free publications as well. There's a WGSN blog where you can get information. There's WGSN on Instagram that's also providing information as well. And to that point, these trend forecasting and trends is not just something that is for big business. Is really talking about consumer sentiments and consumer shifts and consumer desires. And it's something small businesses really should be focused on as well.
And I mean, I would just say, ask questions, be curious. I mean, you know, I kind of go back to what Jaime talked about and how Design Milk started. And you were looking for something and started pulling things together. And I think just be curious and be open and ask questions about, why is this happening? And do I see it happening in somewhere else? And Google's a great tool for things like that. And so I think just dive in a little bit and you'll see these little pieces. And some of it is noise, and some of it you'll see, oh, I see that in this industry and I see that in this industry. So you'll start lining some things up.
Yeah, I think it's also great to look at other industries as inspiration, because I know that I follow all kinds of stuff from fashion websites to, food websites or Instagram accounts. And sometimes those spark ideas for, something design related, or, if you're interested in technology, just kind of looking at all what's going on with innovative websites and stuff like that. What are the trends of how people are navigating websites? Are they even, I think there's certainly a trend toward mobile too. So looking at technology and where that's going, that's certainly going to help drive, how your business is run in the future. So those are definitely things that I look at too. So we couldn't get to everybody's questions, so I'm sorry, but we're going to wrap it up because we're out of time. We've been talking for a long time about these things, although I feel like we could probably go all day because it's such an interesting topic. So I would love to thank Patcraft and WGSN, and thank you, Shannon, Jenna, and Jennifer for joining us. And I'll turn it over to Shannon, who I know everybody's waiting to find out who's winning the AirPods.
I know. I feel like I need a drum roll. So the winner is Denise McLee. Yay. So just to close us out, as Jaime said, this conversation is so valuable, I think, to what everybody is doing. And I'm super inspired by the ideas and the process that you all have shared. And I want to thank you for sharing those experiences, and most importantly, just for spending this time with us. We look forward to future opportunities to connect soon. I hope this is not our last, but I think a super exciting Transform Design workshop. So thank you all on behalf of Patcraft and Design Mail.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye everybody. See you.